My introduction into video began when I set up my own YouTube channel, Kevin Hatley Photography, and I'm very pleased to say that only in this past week I've reached 5,000 subscribers. A level that I never thought I'd got to when I started wildlife photography, and especially my YouTube channel, so thanks to all my subscribers. Initially, video for me was a very steep learning curve. I spent many hours on YouTube watching videos and to find out how to do it. Since then I've learnt a hell of a lot. I've made some mistakes which I'm going to share with you during this 3-part series on videography for wildlife photography, so that I can share my experience and knowledge of using video to film wildlife. Wildlife videography is an art. It's different to normal stills photography. There's a bit to learn, but what I intend to do is I intend to keep it as simple as possible for people who are new to trying out video for wildlife photography. It's truly captivating if you can capture an animal in the wild on video. Whether you're a beginner or a seasoned photographer or videographer, an understanding of your camera and its settings is vital. It's absolutely vital in capturing wildlife at its best. And in this video, what I want to do is share with you my knowledge and my experience and the journey that I've been through in doing video for wildlife, and again via my YouTube channel. And what we'll do is we'll look at the equipment that you need, we'll look at resolution, which is very important, we'll look at frame rates, I'll talk about settings, and I'll share some top tips with you along the way. So let's go and start to learn how to use video to capture stunning wildlife. When it comes to equipment for filming video of wildlife out in the field, you're going to need, obviously you're going to need a camera. The best type of camera that you're really looking for is what's known as a hybrid camera, a camera that has the capability of taking still images as well as taking video, but being able to move from still images to video at the click of a switch, and I'll talk a little bit about that later on. Now, modern day mirrorless cameras probably offer you the best option. They don't have a mechanical mirror that flips up and down, makes a noise, and they also have flip out screens, which are really essential for filming video out in the field. Lenses, you're going to need lenses that can cover what you do in the studio, and there you're looking at lenses from anything from about 16mm and upwards, to lenses that you're going to need for out in the field. And here we're looking at lenses with a focal length of between 70 up to something like this camera, which is an RF 200 to 800mm lens. There are more than one option for cameras for filming. You can use your mobile phone, you could use a GoPro, which I have situated on the top of my camera here, and I normally use that for taking panoramic environmental type shots. Drones can be a bit controversial. Wildlife subject, their welfare is of paramount importance, so you don't want to use a drone where you're going to scare off the wildlife, but they're absolutely fantastic for filming what's known as B-roll, and I'll talk a little bit about that later on. And then we have trail cameras. Modern day trail cameras, the quality of the video that you get off them is fantastic, and I found them an absolutely brilliant aid for locating wildlife, and the quality that you get off a trail camera is excellent, as you can see from the short video clip here. And I did a complete series on trail cameras, which I'll leave a link for below. When it comes to supporting your camera out in the field, one of the most basic fundamentals of setting your camera up for wildlife video is that you must have a stable platform to support your camera when you're using video. Now, there's a number of ways we can do that. We can use a tripod. Basically nothing beats a tripod when it comes to supporting your camera for video. So we can use a tripod, we can use a monopod, a ground pod, bean bags, gimbals, good solid working platform to take video from. I did a separate video on how to support your camera, and again I'll leave a link for that below. Top tip, photo and video mode. Wildlife photography can be very unpredictable. We are very seldom in control of the situation, as wildlife will choose what they want to do and when they want to do it. The scene can change very quickly, and you have to be ready to be able to move from photos to video. But how do we do that? Some cameras have a simple switch where, on a dial to move from photo to video. Others can be set up with a customized button that you preset and instantly you switch from images to video, or the other way around. Believe you me, I have missed some great opportunities on a number of occasions because I haven't been able to switch from images to video quickly. I see this as being an essential thing to be able to do as a wildlife photographer. One of the most important pieces of equipment for videography is your camera's memory cards. I would recommend that you use a SDXC flash memory card. That supports transfer speeds of up to about 300 megabytes per second and has a capacity up to about 2 terabyte. Personally, I use a SDXC card of 128 gigabyte with 250 megabytes per second transfer. I found that to be more than enough for my needs due to its high speed capacity and its transfer speeds. Top tip: memory cards. Be aware, especially if your camera has dual card slots. Some cards don't support certain video recording sizes or frame rates. Check to make sure that video is being recorded to the correct card, the one with the faster writing speed and the higher capacity. Think about how you're going to record your videos and images. Are you going to use the same card? Are you going to use separate cards? And are you going to use backup? Video resolution is something that you have to have a good understanding of, as it refers to the number of pixels in each frame of a video. It measures how clear and realistic your video is going to look like. When it comes to aspect ratio, the most common aspect ratio is 16:9, which you'll find is pretty much standard for computer monitors and televisions. Top tip: resolution. Try and always film your videos to your highest resolution for video quality. Be aware that the higher the resolution that you use, the more battery usage you will use, especially out in the field. A point to note on resolution is that if you're filming in, let's say, 4K, you then go to look at that 4K on a monitor that's only 1080p, you're going to see it in 1080p. That's just something to be aware of. Next thing I want to talk about is video file format. MP4 or MPEG-4 is a file format for storing video and other media. It's an international standard that widely supported by devices and media players. It's a good choice for sharing video on social media, MP4. My Canon cameras automatically record in MP4. So when you look at your video file format, I would suggest or recommend that you use MP4. When it comes to video formats, this is when it can start getting a little bit confusing if you've never looked at it before. And I'm going to try and keep this as brief and as simple as possible, but it's very important to understand. Now, many different countries use different video formats to broadcast and display video. Now, that's due to historical reasons, commercial reasons, development and copyright protection. There are basically two main formats. There's NTSC, which is mainly used in North America, and then there's PAL or PAL, which is used in Europe and other regions. Now, once you set this in your camera, that's it, you don't need to touch it again. It's considered that PAL gives you a slightly better resolution than NTSC. The difference is very minimal. This is the important part. The video format that you select will give you different frame rates, and I'm going to talk about frame rates later on. It's important to understand that the video format that you select is going to give you different frame rates. Most modern day cameras can shoot at a vast array of frame rates for varying uses, from things like cinema, film work, TV, sports and wildlife. And again, I'll explain that to you when I look at frame rates. But basically, video formats, there's two: NTSC for North America and PAL or PAL for Europe. What I'll do now is I'll go through the differences between PAL and NTSC when it comes to frame rates. For PAL, you're looking at 25, 50 and 100 frames per second. 25 frames per second will give you normal action, and you normally use that in the studio like I am today recording this. 50 frames per second, when it comes to wildlife, you're looking at slow motion, and indeed I always film wildlife at 50 frames per second. I won't film it at 25 or 30. And then we have 100 frames per second, which you use for super slow motion. NTSC, their frame rates are 30, 60 and 120 frames per second, and again 30 frames per second is used for normal action or for in the studio. 60 frames per second again is used for slow motion for filming wildlife, and 120 frames per second is your super slow motion. I use PAL format, so if I'm in the studio, we'll be filming at 25 frames per second. If I'm filming wildlife, I'm going to be filming it at 50 frames per second to give me that bit of slow motion, and if I want super slow motion, I'm going to shoot it at 100 frames per second. And slow motion is a subject as part of the series videos that I'm doing, which will follow later in the year. Now, to give you a look forward to the next video in this series on videography, and that's producing YouTube videos. And what it is, it's my 5 steps to success to setting up a YouTube channel for wildlife photography, and it's about my journey and the lessons that I've learned along the way. What we'll do is we'll look at how to get started, we'll look at video content, video production, video editing to a lesser degree, because that's a subject in its own for the future, and I'll give you some top tips along the way. And now back to the video. What I want to do now is go through each of the frame rates, and frame rates are absolutely critical for capturing the magic that's wildlife and their behaviour. A video is basically a super fast slideshow of still pictures, so it's a number of still pictures that flash by in sequence per second, and that's known as frames per second. What I'll do is I'll go through each of the frame rates, both for PAL and for NTSC, and they have their similarities at the frame rates. So the first one we'll look at is 25 and 30 frames per second. It's a common broadcast standard. It's a good all-round frame rate, suitable for a variety of wildlife scenarios. Because I shoot PAL, I'm shooting at 25 frames per second for when I'm in the studio, and in this clip you see now, it's at 30 frames per second, and it's a badger foraging for food. At 50 or 60 frames per second, we're going to use that for capturing faster action. Basically, you're capturing twice as much information as you are at 25 or 30 frames per second, and then when you play that back at normal speed of 25 or 30 frames per second, you get a smooth, slow motion footage. I film all my wildlife at 50 frames per second. And here you have an osprey diving for fish. And the final frame rate that we're looking for in wildlife photography is for super slow motion, and that's either at your 100 or 120 frames per second. And that's used for capturing movement and action that you normally wouldn't see with the naked eye. It slows everything down, as you will see in this clip of a kingfisher diving for fish. Top tip, audio. Poor audio will destroy your videos more than anything else. You have to invest in a good external microphone. Things like shotgun microphones are suitable for stationary setups, sitting in the studio filming, whereas if you're out in the field, look to use something like a wireless microphone. They're great for when you're having to move around. Very important, always test your audio levels before you start recording. Additionally, there are some modern software out there that can also be used where you can denoise background clutter or wind removal where the conditions at the time of filming were too noisy or windy. Having looked at our frame rates, the thing that's critical to go with the frame rate is your shutter speed, which is the next step that we need to look at with choosing our frame rate. The general rule of thumb is to set your shutter speed to 2 times the frame rate. So if you're 25 frames per second, it's 1/50th of a second, 50 frames per second, 1/100th of a second, and 100 frames per second, 1/200th of a second. The following video shows a kingfisher fishing at 3 different speeds. So we can see that in normal photography we can fine tune all our exposure settings. However, in videography we have to set our shutter speed to 2 times the frame rate and not change it. So how do we control our exposure in videography if we can't change, or you're recommended not to change, your shutter speed in relation to your frame rate? And that's what we're going to look at next. Top tip: white balance. The best white balance settings for wildlife photography depend obviously on the lighting condition. I would recommend that if you're a beginner, then just use auto white balance. It's a good choice, and it'll read the ambient light and it'll make the adjustments. If you're more confident to actually set your own white balance, most cameras come with their own preset options that work for a number of shooting conditions. You can select for daylight, sunny or cloudy for when we're outside. So how do we go about setting our exposure for video? After setting the frame rate and the shutter speed to suit, we need to then set the aperture and the ISO. Now, when we shoot still images, generally all 3 of those exposures are under our control. When we shoot video, the shutter speed is set and is determined by the frame rate, as we've already discussed, and it's fixed. So therefore we need to control our aperture and our ISO to set the exposure. Aperture. For wildlife video, a wide aperture is often best, but we may need to adjust it depending on the situation. Wide apertures allow us to isolate the background or the subject in a bird background, just as we do in still images, whereas narrow apertures allow us, or should be used on larger subjects, or to capture multiple subjects in the frame, and also to create more detail of the environment that our subject is in. The final part of our exposure that we need to look at is ISO. And with ISO, generally, the lower the ISO is, it helps us to control image noise. If you're a beginner, I would advise you to start with auto ISO. If you want to set your own ISO, as a general starting point, I would advise you to look between a mid-range of 400 to 800 ISO and then adjust as required. It's harder to see noise in video as compared to stills, so you have more latitude with your ISO and video as it can tolerate more noise. So how do we make those adjustments? Well, with a fixed shutter speed, which is locked into our frame rate, we need to adjust our aperture and our ISO to get the correct exposure. What we need to do now with the camera settings is now that we got a good understanding of the basics of videography and camera settings, we now need to set up our camera ready for video shooting. So first thing we're going to do, as we discussed earlier, is switch it to video mode, as found on the top of the camera. Step 2, go to manual mode, so you've got complete control over all your exposure settings. Step 3, select your video size and quality. For the highest quality results, you're going to want to shoot in about 4K. Then step 4, select your frame rate, 25 or 30 frames per second for normal, 50 or 60 frames per second just to slow it down a bit, 100 frames or 120 frames per second for super slow motion. What we also need to remember or do, which is very important for wildlife photography, is to set up your animal and eye detection for your focus settings. Very important that we set up our autofocus to continuously autofocus, or in Canon it's known as servo. That allows your camera to continually adjust your focus on a subject and its movement. We then need to think about choosing a focus area. There's 2 main options here. You've got flexible zones 1 to 3 and you've got whole area autofocus. Now, flexible zones 1 to 3 allow you to customize the size and the shape of your autofocus area, whereas whole area focus, which I would recommend to beginners, uses auto selection, autofocus across the entire frame of your sensor, making it easier focusing than single point or flexible zone focusing. Whole area autofocusing is best for beginners to wildlife videography. One of the things that we have to do before we actually hit the record button is to carry out some final checks, and these are vital to make sure that we capture the moment that we want in time and haven't made a mistake in doing so. So some of the final checks that you should carry out are firstly things like the direction of the sun. Well, today I couldn't have picked probably a worse day for filming, but I'm moving home at the moment and I had to get this done today. The conditions at the moment are very bright and the sun's quite high in the sky and it's very harsh. So what I've had to do is I've had to come into this wood with the beautiful bluebells around it, try and get a bit of shade to do my filming. So check your light. Light's very important. Stability of your camera. Spoke earlier about the importance of having a good stable platform to work from. So your tripod, all the legs are secure, it's level. Just make sure that your whole working platform is stable to prevent shake. Vitally important is to check your batteries before you leave home to make sure that you've got enough batteries for the session that you're going out to use your video. Video will use up a lot of battery. Storage, your memory cards. It's nothing worse than, and I've done it, believe you me, I've done it. Gone out to film and lo and behold, I've run out of space because the memory card that I've got in the camera is too small. So it's very important to check your memory cards for storage space. Always take a test shot before you start recording, just to check to make sure that the light's good, the audio's good. Video test for Kevin Hatley Photography and first in the series of videography, Kevin Hatley Photography. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then once you've got all your settings dialed in properly, you've checked your settings, you've got the right settings, then you're ready to hit that record button and start filming your video. And good luck. Okay, thanks for watching this edition of Kevin Hatley Photography and Wildlife Videography. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I always enjoy making these videos, especially out here in the beautiful English countryside and amongst the bluebells. All I would ask is that if you've liked it, could you hit the like button? Could I also ask you to subscribe to my channel, Kevin Hatley Photography. It's completely free, doesn't cost anything. And what it does, it allows me to grow the channel and reach out to more people who want to go out into the wild, photograph and film wildlife in their natural habitat. So, until the next time, stay safe, take care, and I hope to see you soon. Bye for now.